3 minutes behind.
As always.
My girlfriend choose a cooking class.
Library.
No, the clock in the
Well, it was like,
room is 3
different.
It's like at least
Yeah,
5 minutes.
like, okay, I can't.
We should be on time according to,
Yeah.
and it's a
I
compromise.
came running in because I was.
So in reality.
The clock is way different.
I guess I just figured out
So-
I was being dudes there.
All right, and we're on. So, call to order the study session for October 9th, and welcome our judge.
Hello. I didn't put together a little paper for you because there's not a lot of new news to report. I will give you the very brief attendance court update, which is it's moving very slowly. Painfully slowly. I met with the school district last week. We have done our side of the intergovernmental agreement. We sent it to them. Well, actually, they drafted it. They sent it to us. We then sent it back to them. I was told last week they had final revisions that just needed to be approved by Justin. So I emailed Justin right away and said, you're going to be getting this email. He wrote me back today and said, still haven't gotten that email. So I have a message into the school district representative to say, where are we? Because from there, once it's all approved, it needs to go to the Oregon Judicial Department for approval before the judge can sign it at Clackamas County, before we can do attendance court. So, and we have no idea how long the state's going to take to actually get it approved. So that's where we sit. We did have a great discussion about it at the judges conference 2 weeks ago, and I got some good ideas there. And it appears I have plenty of time to get those all implemented and in place.
When it does go to the state, is there anything like a letter from us would do to help move it along, or not really? It just is going to move on its own?
I think it's moving on its own. I have been coordinating with the judicial assistant for the juvenile magistrate. She's the one that's got the contact and who it needs to go to. So I'm just going to check in with her and see what she thinks. But she said it's got to go through them before the judge can sign it. The only other thing that was interesting came out of the conference was there has now been, hold on, what did they title it? A plaintiff's motion for a preliminary injunction filed with the district court that could eliminate the ability to suspend driver's licenses for unpaid fines. So they've got a group of plaintiffs that are alleging that they are low income with no ability to pay, and that inquiry is not being made, and so therefore their license can't be suspended. And so that was filed actually just before the conference at the end of September. And of course, I don't know what pace that will take and what the end result will be, but it could mean that we lose any ability to suspend driver's licenses, which
Probably reduce the payment of fines pretty dramatically.
yes.
So what is it again, or who filed this?
Let's see, who filed? Oregon Law Center filed a plaintiff's motion for a preliminary injunction with the district court on behalf of.
Is it a statewide thing, or it's a Clackamas County thing?
You said it was a district court.
It's with the district court, yeah. Yeah, so on behalf of, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 defendants, or 5 plaintiffs, sorry, and all those similarly situated. And the whole basis of it is with no ability to pay.
So,
Go ahead.
so perhaps there might be a procedural thing that could be added in that would just solve that particular problem.
Yeah, we were just talking about this earlier. In, criminal court, usually they filled out their application for a court-appointed attorney, so they've filled out all that information that says, this is what I make, these are my debts, and they've signed it. We're not probably going to do that on every traffic ticket. But that's what they said when this all came up with regard to court-appointed attorneys' fees and fines on criminal cases, was you have to make the inquiry as to whether somebody has an ability to pay. They could come down with a similar ruling here. I think the implementation will be tricky because we just don't have the information on the 200 people that come through in an afternoon that you have on a criminal docket where somebody's applied for a court-appointed attorney.
But do they fill out any paperwork at all before they come into court on those?
Nope. So,
I mean, you could have some kind of triage, right? That ones that come before you who claim that or somehow put that into your questions and have that happen after, so you're not needlessly capturing it on
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
ahead of time, but you capture it on.
Yeah, when somebody makes, because there are times where someone will say, I don't have any ability to pay this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are sort of few and far between, and the question would be, do they have to raise it or do I?
Right.
Because I know in criminal cases, I have to be the one to ask, do you have an ability to pay this before I impose this fine? And that's the requirement.
So Judge Graves, is that a state law? I'm not familiar with this requirement.
To ask the question? I don't know that it's state law. I think it's just it's an opinion, I should say, of whether it's the Court of Appeals or the Oregon Supreme Court. I'm not sure.
But the opinion or the ruling was that
It was the controlling opinion was that you had to ask had to inquire as to whether someone had the ability to pay before you could impose, and it was specific, I believe, to court-appointed attorneys' fees and the fines. It doesn't relate to any restitution, but the fines that you impose and the court-appointed attorney fees.
Okay.
So I can look for the case for you.
I wasn't aware of that.
I know. Well, I wasn't either the first time I showed up in West Lynn, and they're like, yeah, you've got to ask before you tell him he has to pay that. So that's coming down. My only thought as to maybe preemptive action would be the amnesty program that we've been talking about. It has not moved very far forward because the time to do it is next, March, April. But I think it's a good idea. One, it's going to greatly decrease the number of cases we need to touch if we find out that things have to be undone. Because if we can clear those cases out ahead of time, that would certainly help. And we will keep kind of moving forward on what that program will look like and how we can put it in place for March or April. I think that was all I had.
So I have a question for you, and I've chatted just a little bit with one or two other council and as our city manager. Everything's going really well. You're doing a good job, and we got things nailed. I think 3 or 4 years ago, we weren't having meetings with you at all, and so these have been great. But I'm wondering now if, say, semi-annually instead of quarterly might fit your life and your schedule better. And of course, in the interim, if you needed to, talk to us about anything or anything came up, you could do what you would always do anyhow, just get in touch with us and say, hey, I need to come to, the next meeting. But would you be amenable to looking at going to a semi-annual instead of a quarterly report out?
When you see how slow court moves, that makes sense.
Well, that was kind of, the thing. It's like, things don't seem to change that frequently, but over a 6-month period, it's possible, more changes. And like I said, if there was anything we needed to know in the interim, I know you'd get in touch with us. So,
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Yeah, we'll work towards that end. Thank you so much.
That'll actually put us probably right around, March of next year when
when you'd know
looking
about
at the amnesty stuff. And right now we do have attendance court scheduled for December 10th. We'll see whether that happens or not, but we might actually have had some attendance court between now and then too. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before Bonnie leaves, can Bonnie sit down for 1 second?
Oh, yes.
So everybody here knows, but the public doesn't necessarily know that Bonnie is our new finance director here at the City of Milwaukee, and I wanted to congratulate her and thank her for taking the job.
Yes.
I'm very excited. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have you. Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
See ya. All right, good evening, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
Evening.
Kelly Brooks, Assistant City Manager. Jordan is our Public Affairs Specialist, is going to be doing most of the talking tonight, but I did want to give a quick introduction of him and of why we're talking about social media tonight. So over the course of, I don't know, I think I've been around for about 10 months now. I've gotten, different questions from time to time about, why did you post this? Or, what could we share this item of information? And it just made me realize maybe we should just come in and check in and talk about, okay, what are the social media platforms that we operate on today as a city, and what policies and best practices do we use to guide our content on those sites? And so that's really all tonight is. It's really informal, and it's just a chance for you all to hear directly from Jordan on how we're doing, what are some metrics of our success in terms of engaging on those platforms, and then what practices does he put in place to think through, okay, how do we get the most leverage out of the things that we do put up on our social media platforms? So that's it. I may chime in from time to time, but mostly it'll be Jordan.
Thanks for having me. Just going to go through a few things, just kind of give you a little history of when we started using our Facebook and Instagram and Twitter accounts, kind of some follower numbers, things like that, and then kind of go through our mindset, just why we have them and what we're sort of using them for, and some of our goals, and then go into some of the best practices that are sort of industry-wide standards, and then also more city-specific that sort of been tested over the years. So kind of help you understand why or why we're doing something a certain way, and then field any questions you have. So the city started its Facebook account in 2010, and that's actually, it seems a little late to the game. I think maybe there were some policies in place at the time that kind of prevented it, but so that kind of accounts too for some of the numbers we have in our followers and likes on our page. And then Twitter was 2014 and Instagram 2015, and we've been using primarily Instagram and Facebook a lot. We do use Twitter a bit, but for Milwaukee, we just don't have a lot of audience on Twitter. We have people that follow us, but we just don't have a whole lot of engagement, and so we kind of manage our resources strategically and put more efforts into Instagram and Facebook at this time. But that's more just true of Milwaukee. It could be a different demographic if you went to like Oswego or Westland or something like that. And this is kind of how we use each platform. Instagram, for instance, like just because it's so visual, it's basically photos, and you can't really click on links or anything in the posts. We use it just for more like awareness and announcements, and also to kind of cultivate our own identity. It helps when we share pictures of what's going on, art, events, other things that kind of helps just paint a picture of Milwaukee, and that's what Instagram's forte is.
So like if you post next week's open house, you can just post some words, but you can't actually post a link to the details on the open house.
Yeah, you can click on hashtags on Instagram, but as far as a link, like they've prevented you from doing that. What some organizations do to kind of get around that is they'll switch up their bio each time. Like if your bio says your website is milwaukeeoregon.gov, you'll switch it to like the / library groundbreaking event or something like that to kind of get around it. But it's a little cumbersome, and you kind of have to be on top of it a lot, or you'll have an outdated link there. So for the most part, we've just been using hashtags and then the description for the photo, and then Twitter is more, urgent breaking news, something that you need to know immediately, but it kind of goes away pretty fast because it gets lost in other tweets. And then Facebook's more of the all-in-one, more details. You can put a lot of, interactive things with it, obviously. And so I tend to tailor each message to each platform. There's sometimes people will link up like their Facebook and their Instagram, or Instagram and Twitter, or not Instagram and Twitter, Facebook and Twitter. So it just pushes it, and then it kind of gives you like a little Facebook link ... and it looks a little wonky. So we try to avoid that, just make it as streamlined as possible. So we try to make sure the message is right for each platform. Right now, the city has almost 3,300 likes, and then a little more than that in followers. That just means they don't officially like the page, I guess, because they don't want that level of affiliation or something, I don't know, but still want to know about what's going on. And then almost 1,600 for Twitter and about 1,000 for Instagram. And by far, Instagram's the one that's gaining the most traction out of all of them. Facebook still gets a lot. Twitter's just sort of kind of plodding along, few extra followers here and there.
Now, when you say getting the most traction, you mean the numbers are building?
Yeah,
Or you mean you can tell something by how many people are actually looking at things?
No, yeah, it's more like just follower numbers. Instagram's a little bit harder to get analytics from at the moment. I'm sure they're working on something where you can find it out better, but and that's kind of hard too to gauge on Instagram because you can't click on anything but hashtags, and then so it's like you can't really get an accurate number by that because they can mean so many different things.
Do you have a slide coming up that shows the progression of followers?
Yeah, I do actually. Right here.
There you go.
So I made this a couple weeks ago when we had 3,270, so it's not the same number as the slide before, but so that's how we grew. So the first number is September 2016, and then the last one is September 2018. And that big spike from about 2017 to 16, like from December to June, it's mainly been a lot of event postings. We'll sometimes for events just give it a couple dollars like boost, so it's sort of sponsored and more people see it. And usually when we do that, we gain a lot of followers. So that's when we first started doing it, and that's, I think, was the primary cause for that bump right then.
So does Facebook track for you how many shares you get on a post?
Yeah, it'll track how many shares. It'll even track how many people have just seen it in their feed, like passively, like scrolling through it. It also tracks how many people click on the links you have in your posts, and then it also tracks, I think, how many people just click on the post but not the link. So it's pretty. Facebook has their analytics down pretty well. And I don't know if you wanted to know other numbers, like Lake Oswego has about 3,000 likes right now. Westland has 3,800. Gladstone, I think, has like 300, but I think they just started using it like about a year ago. Wilsonville has 2,800, so I think we're doing pretty well for a city of our size and our population. We have a lot of engaged residents on Facebook, and a lot of people find out things through Facebook, so it's a good platform for us. And so just to kind of go through how and why we sort of use each platform, we use social media as just kind of one of our communications tools. We know it's not really like our sole communication tool, and so that's how we use it. We know it's supposed to supplement all the others. You know, we have our website, our newsletters, events, things like that, public meetings, and so this is really just another way to sort of paint a complete picture of Milwaukee. We're trying to use them to reach just extra audiences, like to try to reach as many people as possible. Because if you try to get everybody through a website, it's not going to work. If you try to get everybody through print or something, it's not going to work. So this is just sort of a way to kind of round out our communications approach.
So, Jordan, don't you also use Nextdoor, or do you just not consider that a social media platform, or do we not use that and somebody else does? And
no, the city doesn't use Nextdoor. I had heard from Jason and Mitch a while back that they had tried getting into it. It's one of those things where the city has to be invited to get into it anyway, but at the same time, it requires a lot of time and effort to kind of monitor all those things, and we also sort of gauged the environment of Nextdoor, and it seemed to be pretty combative most of the time.
Yeah, that's been my experience.
Well, I would say that the county in the last 6 months has been making great use of Nextdoor.
Yeah, and I don't
think I think that there's a public entity access to post, but you're not reading the stuff.
You can push it out.
Yeah.
So you can push it out, just so people know. So the city has 17 Nextdoor groups in our boundaries. They don't align with our current NDA boundaries, which has been part of what's made this difficult, is making sure that we can target them. They're continuing to change that application, though. So to give them some credit, they're coming up with ways where we might be able to use it better in the future, in terms of being able to create boundaries that we basically overlay on their boundaries and creating separate boundaries that then would allow us to communicate differently. But that's still coming. I actually met with them when I went back to the ICMA conference to have this discussion to try and figure out if there's a way for us to better utilize it as a tool. And they've made some big changes in the last year. So we as a staff can come back to you at a future time. What I have said in the past is staff resource is just really hard. If we do post there, when the county posts, they can't see the comments back. So part of this is there's not a way for them to fix it. So if there's a problem that's going on, they can't be in the discussion to explain it. And that's a little daunting.
Well, you can also close discussion. You don't have to let a discussion train build. You can make a post and you can close discussion. So if you just want to be giving information, if it's not an engagement back and forth tool, it's a information dissemination tool.
Is the county doing that? Do you know?
I think they are.
They're just leaving it so you can't comment. We'll give them a call, but that has been part of the concern is that we can't participate in the conversation, and that makes me uncomfortable.
Which is sort of unfortunate because about a third of what and I try not to read it, but about a third of what I do see is people complaining about the city. So it would be great for us to actually have that information.
Well, and
there's
part
a pothole,
of it,
or there's a
people also don't want us on there. So that's been the other part of this is that I've actually had pointed comments from community members saying, it's not your venue.
Yeah.
This is our chances. I'm just telling you that those are the comments.
Well, and I've seen people
to
complain that because now there's businesses can post and stuff, and they complain that businesses are monitoring them, and I think the businesses too don't have access to read. They're just posting but anyway, yeah. I mean, I think there's some and it would be a huge time suck if you started trying to respond to all that. But using it as an information deployment tool, I think it's the same text you would put on Facebook or you would put on, wherever. And so it's just a few more seconds to post it somewhere else. It wouldn't be a huge time suck.
And I do, and correct me if I'm wrong, but at least anecdotally, I'm in conversation with police. I mean, there is some level of monitoring happening where we're getting information passed along to us via Nextdoor and responding to various things. It's just not really formalized, and we don't have an account. So,
well, we hear it from council members who are on some of their accounts, and we hear it from police officers who live in town and are sort of watching their neighborhoods, and so things come through, but we still can't directly go back on then and reply to those either. So it's convoluted. If it gets to the point where it's that easy, where we can do it that fast, then that's great. It hasn't been in the past. And at least the number of steps that we had to go through when I was talking to the guy at the counter, it wasn't that yet, but it might be.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fair question.
And I think we also want to explore other platforms too as they come out. I mean, we sort of looked into Snapchat a little bit, but didn't think it would really meet the city's needs. But if there's other even new platforms that come out, I think we should explore them and see if we can find a way to use them. But I think Nextdoor would be good if there's some changes or some other practices in place.
Our resource.
Yeah, if it's in our resource. Yeah. So one of the first things just for all social media is just to connect. We try to be like a sort of pseudo center of the community, like to try to share what's going on, also kind of talk about policies and decisions and projects and things like that, to kind of sort of be a one-stop shop for a lot of things. We know we can't be that for everything, but as much as we can. We also want to foster conversations. One good example of that is the plastic bag ban that we've just posted a news article about that, and you could just kind of see the comments coming in, and people not necessarily talking at the city, but just talking to each other, and people would post concerns or confusing facts, and people would sort of monitor each other and try to correct them, and it was nice. And that's kind of what we're looking for, is that a place to engage in a safe place, and then also somewhere where it seems there's like validity to it, and people like the city council and staff will see it too, and we can pass those concerns on. Also, just to broadcast events, market events. By far, we've noticed that marketing events through Facebook is much better than like print advertising or online advertising. So that's been sort of a surprise that we've been using lately, and but very nice because it's very affordable and easy and really effective. So
yeah, I will tell you, I will second that. The farmers market has cut its print advertising to almost nothing.
Yeah,
I mean, it's all Facebook and email now. Yep.
And there seems to be a lot more validity behind it too, like it's just seeing an ad, but this one seems, yeah, like you could see who's posting it. It's the city and there's other people commenting on it and it adds credence to it. We also want to try to get people involved in local government and we can get more volunteers, become involved in their neighborhoods, join boards and commissions. We've used all the platforms to recruit for boards and commission positions, for volunteers for other groups, and it's been really effective too. We've also made a few requests, like we requested one time for the, I think it came from you, Councilor Beatty, for the Pioneer Cemetery. Like we helped try to get some volunteers one time, and it helped. I think they said they got several applications afterwards. So
They expanded their board,
for the first time, the Willamette cleanup had more people from Milwaukee cleaning up Milwaukee than not from Milwaukee cleaning up Milwaukee.
Well, that's good to hear.
First time I've done it in whatever it's been going 10 years. So
yeah,
it's working.
And that's what we love to see is that, like, just more of our own community involved in our own activities and events. And we also use it to show off these activities and kind of, let people know that your city is working, your city is doing something that's making your lives better and making a better environment. Kind of also foster our identity that we want to, be a welcoming place. We want to be transparent, show everyone what's going on, make people feel like it's a place they're proud to call home. We also use it a lot to collect feedback. I think all the recent plans and projects have been using it to do surveys, and visioning and comprehensive plan, climate action plan have all used it. We also used it to do some voting for the South Downtown Plaza design, and they said they got a lot of online participation through that. And there's Kelly. And we want to build relationships, and that's really what was one of the best parts about social media, is that it kind of humanizes the city. It's not just some entity that makes decisions and you're not really a part of it, or you don't really know it, you don't really understand what's going on. It kind of feels like someone you're sort of getting to know, like a friend a little bit, and that's kind of what we're really striving to do, is just make ourselves a more tightly knit community and have good relationships with each other, and then feel empowered to participate. And so we're just going to go through some best practices too that I've been sticking to since I've been here. And this is sort of a compilation of a lot of different sources. I've looked at IAP2. I've looked at just through some best practices I got when I was going through the University of Oregon, getting my master's degree. I also heard some really great speeches from social media professionals in the Portland metropolitan area. So kind of combined all those into something that's been working really well for us and tested. It's not to say that we won't change them at any certain time, but this is really what's been working for us and what we're kind of use going forward. So we're trying to get something where the posts are relevant and reflect community's interests, but also in a timely way. And we'd like to do that trying to use the visuals whenever we can, something that's memorable. Like we use this for the bulky waste cleanup. It was one of the highest liked photos we put on Instagram and Facebook. People thought it was funny. I guess Monty Python, Eric Idle. But yeah, it's just trying to use visuals whenever you're posting something is really helpful. There was a study that was coming out that how fast society is sort of going to like a more visual-based everything. Like Google is looking at ways to just, whether you already see it, like you take pictures with your phone and search with pictures instead of words. So when you cut down on words but increase visuals, that's when more people pay attention to your posts. We try to be as engaging as possible and encourage feedback. That's with the surveys and contests to get a gift card if you participate and things like that. Come out to town halls. But at the same time, we also don't take ourselves too seriously and have fun. Like this one is, I mean, depending on how you feel about cats, this is actually one of our highest liked photos that we've ever had on Facebook, and it was actually for Kelly's job.
Because it's warm and fuzzy.
I think I was one of your likes.
It had, let's see, it was more than 5,600 people saw it. 220 people at least clicked on the link to learn about the job. There was 33 shares. There was, and then I think about almost 90 people liked or laughed at it or loved it or something like that. And so we try to be fun, but like in cases like this isn't like the only avenue that we promote a job. Of course. But,
So is this how we got you?
yeah. Kelly just loves cats so much.
That's for me.
I'm a minority on this one because I don't like for job postings the cat thing. I have complained about it too.
Oh.
So I'll be on. I mean, I'll throw that out there.
Just for
I
public
love cats.
disclosure.
Yeah.
But
I think it's cute.
married to a professional recruiter, he says, I don't think this is the image you want for certain positions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're going for. Kelly, we're very lucky that we got you the cat.
We got her despite the
So
cat photo.
I have to own up to having said something to Ann that I don't care for the cat
No, we'll
on
do
certain
that.
positions.
Yeah, we were talking today. I mean, engineering, probably not using this, just because I don't.
Use a tiger.
Yeah,
But didn't we just use another cat in one of the?
We did recently, but yeah, we don't have to do it for all of them.
It was a sustainability job that we did, the cat.
Yeah, I think it was sustainability.
We did not on the city attorney at request.
And the engineer, I'm not sure that would.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we did it for that one or not. But the point too, though, is that like we're trying to make it so you can post something serious, but it doesn't feel like you're getting an ad or it's spammy or it becomes something that's like you can still post about serious things, but using something fun to kind of merge audiences together. But I do understand, what you're saying, because it's not necessarily the most professional thing, and I guess that's kind of where we posted on other platforms where it is more professional, and then people can kind of get
So
pointed to.
how many shares were there on this for?
33.
33 shares.
And do we know,
That's a lot.
do we ask the applicant pool how they got to us?
I'm not actually sure.
We do usually, don't we? Yeah.
So Gary usually does, and a lot, like on the attorney one, we looked at it pretty in depth. We looked at the sustainability one. Actually, my LinkedIn account seems to have helped on that one.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting a number of people coming through on that one. And other people at the city shared it through their LinkedIn accounts. So that seemed to help a decent amount. We get a lot off of Indeed.com. And Indeed, basically what they do is they just search all the other websites and they pull them in. So they go to NeoGov and they actually pull in all of theirs. So people check there first before going to NeoGov, and that seems to be where we get most of our jobs.
Because I was going to say, remembering looking at all our attorney applicants, I don't think any of them said they saw it on Facebook. It was other places.
I think the posting, I mean, it should not necessarily reflect the job, but also reflect the platform. And I think that the image that we have on Facebook.
This was not used on my LinkedIn account.
Right. And it wasn't there on Indeed, and it wasn't there on the Gov. So that's why this doesn't bother me on Facebook. Obviously, you wouldn't have put this on any of the other platforms, but it's reflective of the image that we've built on Facebook, and that's why I think it's okay there.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just add. I mean,
Could have been a puppy, you would have been good. But.
We had heard of the concerns and knew of them, and that is part of what prompted part of this conversation as well. Just a touch point with all of you all about this is what we're doing, this is how we're sharing things, and y'all are ambassadors of the city as well in our image, cultivating our image. So this is part of why we're here. Is just say this is what we've been doing. This is why. What are your thoughts? So we appreciate hearing them, and anytime we hear, we appreciate them. So.
And I know that maybe I'm the minority here, so that's fine.
Sometimes each of us are the minority. Sometimes it's fine.
Feel free
I'm
to
just
keep
glad you
sending
didn't
your
use
email.
pictures of all the city council. Yeah. So.
It's good to have someone in the minority. Stop to think about things for a little bit. But to what you said, Councilor Falconer, that's kind of what the thought is, like playing to the strengths of the platform. And so, And also, I mean, Milwaukee is the type of place where you can kind of be a little bit more risky. Maybe other cities' Facebook pages, you can't. You might get more backlash. But in Milwaukee, when we've posted funny things or a little bit edgier things, it's really embraced. And so it's kind of, so that's where you have to be really specific to your audience and your
because if you don't put that, because what you said in the previous slide about text only being bad is absolutely, I mean, that's been my total experience with the farmers market and the CMI page is if you post a text only thing that doesn't have a photo or an image of some sort, nobody looks at it. It gets nothing, and you may as well not have bothered.
Might as well put a
So
wall
if you're
up.
not going to put that, then what are you going to put? A picture of an engineer with a tool or something? I mean, I don't know.
I don't think that's
And what the county's been doing, if you see theirs, is they have like the same consistent image. It's a graphic. It's white on blue.
Their
They
icon.
do, and they do sort of a we're hiring and this is what we're hiring. But again, it's text heavy, and I really appreciated that. What has been created is a little bit of grit. Because that's what Milwaukee is we're a little bit of grit, right? So it's kind of, it's a little more fun and it's a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, well, I don't want to convince anybody to like cats, but I'm glad most of you like it.
Actually, he does want to convince you all to like it.
And so just talking about posting, when looking at analytics for most of our platforms, mornings and evenings are the best time to post. For Facebook, at least, peak time is about 8 o'clock. So sometimes when we're trying to reach that really peak audience, we'll schedule posts to automatically go into our feed around that time. And then weekends are the best, too. And for some reason, it's Wednesdays. I don't know why
Wednesdays are the best?
No, it's it's
Friday,
one of the best.
Friday to Sundays are good? I read something that said Friday, Saturday was bad and not to post.
I think a lot of it depends on your platform, too, and your audience, but at least for the city's Facebook page and its Twitter and Instagram, I think it was Instagram, too, it was the weekends. And I don't know if it's just people have time on their hands or they're busy during the week or I'm not sure, but for us at
they're
least.
looking for something to do, and they know now that that's a place to look.
Yeah, that could be it, too, yeah.
That could be.
I mean, I searched up some, practice, best practices stuff, and one of the things I found said, Sunday through Thursday, but not Friday, Saturday. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
And then for just a number of posts, we're trying to not do it too often. At most 1 to 2, but 2 is pretty rare for us sometimes. But really what we're trying to do is just create some breathing room so you don't just see us pop up in your feeds all the time and become sort of spammy or advertisey. We want to be relevant enough that people pay attention still, and when you keep posting a lot, people just sort of start to ignore it. It just becomes noise with the rest of everything else. So, and we will purposely schedule in breaks, like for a day or two, just so people don't feel like they're constantly getting something from us. So when we do say it is more important, it makes more of an impact.
I also, we were joking about this back in the back room before coming out here today, that one of the communication tools that we have when we have a problem is actually Facebook. So on my first week of work, thank y'all, when we had the water boil notice, the number of people who are notified by Facebook is really surprising. And there was some frustration from people that they were notified by
was how
Facebook.
They learned about it, yeah.
But that's literally why we have it, right? Like, this tool is there, and the number of shares we got that day was significant because it was something that was important, and it was something that people weren't just blocking out of their brain when they saw one of our Facebook posts. And I really appreciate that that is a venue that we use when we're in critical situations. Thanks.
And also what it does too is it keeps our numbers up too. We've noticed going back through the analytics, if you post 3 or 4 times in a row, like, people start unliking you. And so you don't.
Really? Much.
Yeah, it's too much.
Yeah,
or they unfollow you
that
at
little
least.
button that says, I see this too often.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it go away.
And so we want to stop people from doing that or not encourage them to do it.
No, I mean, I tell them, I see this too often, not for the city stuff.
Oh, good.
Other things. I know, yeah.
And so another practice that we use is, really just holding back, which sometimes is actually really hard when we see people just posting strange comments or things that are totally wrong. But what happens when we start responding to them is it just empowers them to keep responding. It just kind of feeds the troll and keeps them going. And so we don't ever delete or block a user unless they've done something that's, like they're using inappropriate language or they're threatening or something like that. But if they're just being negative, we tend not to respond for those reasons. If somebody has a negative comment but actually has sort of more legitimate concerns like, we were talking about Axle Tree one time, and people want to know how many parking spaces were. They're like, oh, there's not going to be any parking. Well, then we would post like, hey, thanks, like, looks like you're concerned about parking. Like, this is actually how many parking stalls are in the new building, and this is why there's this many parking stalls. So for things like that, we'll respond, but for things that are just sort of rants, we tend not to.
And like on the plastic bags, there was a lot of self-policing, right?
Yeah.
There were people who responded to the negative ones, so the city didn't have to.
Well, and then, yeah, and we were kind of ready to go in and start responding, but then we saw other people posting about it, and that's kind of that was like one of my big goals, actually, to have with our social media platforms, is to have the community sort of advocating on our behalf, which was nice. I mean, people are informed enough to know what we're talking about, and then willing enough to sort of stick their neck out for us and get into a social media battle, which that's very brave.
Well, and that was such a good example, because that was an effort that was brought to us, and so and brought for the community, by the community, and so the fact that the community is the one engaging in that, discussion is perfect. And so it's not really, coming to bat for us. It's it's defending their own initiative.
That's
so
right.
It's wonderful. I was, and also I just want to say, I think the city, and I noticed this with the parks too, the parks, in the city you do a really good job of that, of showing restraint, but also, chiming in when you feel like it's necessary, and just kind of like, just really quickly correct the record. And so I appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And then when we're posting, we also want to find a balance. Like, we don't want to post too many things that are like policy or project driven. We'll kind of intersperse it with fun things, like do an event, then do a project, or do a fun photo of like the sculpture garden, and then talk about like council agenda items. So people don't get turned off. Like, if they feel like we're too policy heavy or we're too project heavy, we want to avoid that. So we'll mix it up, also throw in some fun and serious things at the same time. So it's all just kind of about striking a good balance with your audience to know what they're really into. But if we had, if our audience was really demanding more, project information, which sometimes they are, we will. It'll just be a lot of like South Downtown stuff. Or if we know a lot of impacts are coming, we'll try to like stock it up a little bit and then go back onto other subject matters.
Do you monitor other jurisdictions locally to see how they're using Facebook or Instagram for ideas? Or
I usually take a look at other cities, see what they're doing, look for ideas on different things to do. Also, check on the group ELGL. They kind of share a lot of what other cities are doing, and so like I've looked at that too for some of their social media articles about kind of what cities have been trying out. We're always kind of open to new ideas and new ways of doing things, and I think there's always better, more effective ways to do it. So.
Are most of the cities in the metro area using the 3 platforms that we're using?
Most are. It kind of depends. I think Oregon City, I don't know if they have a Facebook page, but I know they have like a Twitter page and I think an Instagram page. So most do have the 3 main ones. Yeah. And then a few have like Snapchat and stuff. I've seen a lot of like libraries have Snapchat too, but
I did a little comparison, so I'm passing it around. Just as Facebook only. It's not any other platforms. I compared what other cities were doing.
It's helpful. Wow.
So, and that gets to your point about resting and how much we are the lowest in the number of our posts.
The lowest in what? Please.
Lowest in the number of posts in a month. I did the month of September, and we had 11. The next lowest city had 15, which was Wilsonville, and 18, which was Happy Valley, and then the others were considerably more. I tried to kind of catch categories of the kind of posts they were doing. It was really very different city to city. It was interesting how different some of the cities were. Some of it, like the fact that Lake Oswego, they have a lot of parks stuff because they have their own parks district, so they're doing their parks as well as their other stuff.
I think they have a lot of emergency preparedness and police stuff because they don't really have a police Facebook page.
Their police don't have a Facebook page, but they did not have any police stuff.
Oh, they didn't?
They had one emergency. Everybody, I will point out, had at least one emergency preparedness post for Emergency Preparedness Month, and a few had multiple. But yeah, they only had one.
Yeah.
A lot of them, yeah, I've tried to capture if their police department had Facebook pages, I've noted that. And if they had one for their library, and if they had any others that, seemed that were the city. It's interesting, too, some of them promote their Downtown Business Alliance. Happy Valley did that 3 times in the month. Others don't seem to do that. Some had, surveys. Some aren't running surveys, or they aren't promoting them on their thing.
Well, maybe one of the differences with Happy Valley is that their business alliance is actually generated from their city.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we try to share things that the downtown business does. Usually it's First Friday stuff, but
right.
Yeah, I think it probably depends on who's posting in your community. But
right. Well, I mean, our business alliance isn't like, I just post at the end just for pure, interest, that the Downtown Oregon City Business Alliance, which is, they have a paid leader. They're not like ours that's completely volunteer, but they have a huge presence and a lot, they have more likes than any of these cities have.
That's downtown.
Yeah, Downtown Oregon City
Which is an award-winning, national award-winning city, so therefore they would have, I think, just naturally they would have more likes because they would come from all over the nation because they want to see what that city's doing. But Oregon City also has the Oregon City Business Alliance, which sort of runs in the same way that the Chamber of Commerce in Oregon City runs. So each of those have their own Facebook pages also.
Yeah. And the number of times we post sometimes comes down to staff capacity, because I'm usually pretty much the only one that posts. So if I get too busy, I don't get to post as much sometimes as I would like to. But yeah, a lot of cities have their own dedicated social media person too. So it kind of depends on how you want to structure it within the city. So yeah, that was basically what I was going to talk about today. If you have any questions, but this is very helpful too. Thanks, Lisa, for doing this.
Yeah, I feel like, I do. So I do the Facebook page for the market and and for Celebrate Milwaukee, and I will sit, one night at home watching TV or whatever, and I'll do 3 or 4 posts for the coming week, time to go at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., because I do agree that the 8 to 10 a.m. seems to be the time that gets the most attention.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't take me that much time, or I'll see something in the paper and I'll be like, oh, I got to put that, and I'll go run in and do it. But yeah, I mean, I guess I don't feel like it has to take a lot of time, and I guess I would like to see us doing more public, sharing some of the stuff, some of the, emergency preparedness stuff that I've sent around before, or some of the business development stuff that Alma and Valeria are working on, or public, and then there's always this week and that month. So Public Works, there's a Public Works Week, and we should recognize our Public Works guys on Public Works Week, and not just guys, but people, and that kind of thing. And I guess I don't feel like we do a lot of that. And I did see a little bit more congratulating people on things on some of the other sites, or, marking that kind of thing. So
yeah, I definitely think we could do more things like that for sure. Yeah. We just want to make sure we, just still have the balance of that we're not posting too much. But yeah, definitely we could do more things like that. Yeah.
I'll just chime in a little bit too. It is. I do want to make sure that as we're cultivating these platforms, we're maximizing the platforms to the benefit of the city. So I think we could and are working to get more content generated. And again, that's not just Jordan generating content. That means if you're working on a project, that you actually have the photos and you are working on the summaries and you're putting good facts together and prompting that, which is kind of an overall effort on the behalf of the city, that as you're doing things, you're thinking with an eye towards content that you could be sharing on these platforms as well. The place I get a little resistant is when we are sort of simply passing things on for other entities that do have their own platforms that they're cultivating as well. It's not that we don't do it. It's just I'm protective, I guess, a little bit protective of the platforms that we have and making sure that we use those to get messages out on behalf of the city, because these are the tools that we have to use. So I think that's the balance that I'm always looking for as well.
Mm-hmm. But some of the, I mean, there's a difference between just passing along something like from the Chamber of Commerce, which the city doesn't really, I mean, you know, have a role in per se, and things that we actually belong to, like, or that we have, that we sit as liaisons to, like the watershed councils or whatever. So I see a difference in some of those too.
Well, I have to say that, I mean, if we made it a practice to begin to post what's going on in a lot of the things that we're involved with as city councilors, and actually Chamber of Commerce is one of those, then, I mean, just for myself, there's like 5 entities, you know, I think, or something like that. So there's probably 2 or 3 for Lisa, and we were not even going to count his. And, and that, I mean, it would be, I fear it would be inundated with other people's information, and what we might hope for in some of those, and I'll use the Chamber of Commerce as an example. The Chamber of Commerce puts out a newsletter, and so when we're doing something, we have the ability to have our event listed on their newsletter, you know, and that's well and good because we're involved with them and a member of them. But I'm not too sure that should work the other way. That sounds overwhelming and cumbersome to me because there are so many different kinds of organizations.
Well, certainly not everything everybody's doing is of
But if Nikki Wick was doing a downtown cleanup or
well, they just did,
cleanup.
right? They just did a parks cleanup in our parks, you know, a major cleanup in 3 of our parks together with NCPRD, and we didn't promote it.
I thought that was
but NCPRD did, and that's like our Parks Department.
This was one about 3 weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we do try to share things, that are happening in our community, but not, kind of like how you were saying, Will, to take, share the things that are more directly affecting our community, but then also not make it so we're sort of losing our identity, that we still kind of have our own strong voice, and then we can bring in other partner agencies. Like, we still definitely want to be a good community partner and help get the word out about things, but still sort of preserve our own voice too. So
to what you said a second ago, Kelly, when people in this, when staff or whomever is working on projects, and they should be thinking ahead, like, how can we also promote this? So I'm curious as to how you determine what gets posted, or how do you get information to post the content?
I've been trying to encourage, like, for instance, engineering, and right now with all the South Downtown stuff, I've been going to their meetings to kind of learn about the traffic impacts or other sort of community impacts that are going on. And so I'll learn it when I either go to the meetings, or I also just keep reminding them, like, hey, like, if you know of something coming up that's, going to maybe affect driving or something like that, or closing sidewalks, like, please, like, let me know. Like, just, even if you don't know if it's important or not, just send it my way, and we'll take a look at it. So that's one example, but that's what I've been trying to do with other departments too, is if you have something going on, like, please let me know. Like, we would love to put it up.
Like the bridge christening the other day, that type of thing.
Yeah, and for some things like that, like Jason or I will make the event on Facebook or something and promote it. But like David Leviton, he'll always let me know, like, if comprehensive plan stuff's coming up. So I kind of have to coordinate with a lot of departments, and then also rely on them remembering to tell me too sometimes. But then also sometimes we can kind of drive it too with, like, since I'm also doing the newsletter, I get their content, so I can sometimes sort of schedule out when I know stuff in their articles coming up to put on social media.
And we miss things sometimes. So I think, Council President Beatty, you were like, hey, what about the walking map? I'm like, oh yeah, walking map, So we did a post about the walking map. So there are definitely things from time to time that we kind of get our head down and we're not thinking about promoting them. And somebody, y'all are always welcome to kind of point us to those things for sure, because sometimes that leads to it as well. But I think the process of putting the pilot together, the weekly updates, we have kind of a nice kind of process where we're cultivating and getting information in that can help fuel this as well.
I think the only thing I'd add is that downtown right now is a lot. We've got a lot of stuff going on downtown, and Layla Amon's doing a lot of that. She and Jordan have been working together daily to try and make sure that we're communicating road closures, or we're trying to get information about ribbon cuttings or openings or whatever those things are. So she's in his space, not in our office, in his space probably every other day, talking about what's coming up and how are we going to move things. So that's part of it too.
Okay.
But we definitely need help getting to content sometimes. Yeah, and like Kelly said, we definitely miss things. So yeah, it's always good to get reminders and heads up about stuff going on. Well, if there's no more questions, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for everybody for liking the city's social media accounts. And
Please do.
Yeah, if you haven't, please do. And thanks for giving us reminders and feedback, and always appreciated.
Well, thank you for all the work you do. I always, if I'm just searching Facebook and I haven't seen anything from City of Milwaukee, then I go search it out and say, okay, what have I missed anything? What's going on? So and I do the same with CMI. Celebrate Milwaukee. It's like, I like to see what they're posting.
Yeah.
Because if it's you that's doing it, man, you're doing a good job. So thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, thanks.
And I appreciate you doing the branding and focusing on the font and all of the things that you're doing to create a unified space for us, an image. I think it's helpful, and I think it looks really good. And even the slide presentation, the graphics were really nice. I had mentioned to Ann the other day that when I looked at the Milwaukee pilot, although I always think it's pretty well put out, for some reason this one seemed visually better even than it normally is. And so I mentioned to her, hey, give kudos to because it looked really good. Just the articles, the pictures, the spacing, everything.
Thank you. That's really nice to hear.
Represents the city really, really well. I think, you go to our website and, kind of go on over to some of our other, our counterparts in the region, and I really think that
one of the better.
We're doing a really extraordinary job. And, compared to our population and the number of times you're posting, maybe those things don't necessarily correlate to, how many likes we get. I think that, content is really important, and I think you're doing a really good job with it.
Thank you.
Well, and I think if you look at the sheer volume of the responses we're getting on surveys and at town hall meetings, and a lot of that's thanks to you guys. You're drumming up people to come to the meetings. But we actually had a survey over 1,000 people this last month. That's a big deal. Most communities of this size don't get over 150. Getting that kind of number shows that true engagement's happening. Jordan and Jason are a big part of that, and I really appreciate it. And I do want to just highlight again that it's Jordan and Jason. There's two people who are building out this identity that you're seeing throughout the city, and I think it's a lot, and I'm shocked at times how much we're able to accomplish with two people.
Us too.
I know. Them too.
Yeah, I've always thought the content's gorgeous, and I think the website is very attractive. I would still comment that it's still slow.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Be my negative too.
Yeah, we've noticed that too a lot, and we get back to our web hosting service, and I'm not sure why it keeps getting bogged down, and I don't know if they're maybe not telling us, or they don't know either, but yeah, we've noticed it too. It's frustrating for us, and especially when you have something that looks so nice, like you don't want it to have to take so long.
Yeah. They're using servers from 1984.
I guess, yeah. Or every other city website is off the same server or something. I don't know. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jordan.
Great job.
Thanks.
All right.
Actually, as the team is moving over, I'm going to make a public announcement that'll show up on Facebook tomorrow.
Okay.
So the library, we have gotten everything out of the library, which has been great. Everybody is moved into the Pod Palace. Unfortunately, we have had some issues with Pod Palace.
With what?
With electricity. Electricity, getting the electricity and the internet in. Basically, TriMet and PGE have had some issues. They've been great. They've been prioritizing them. I really appreciate it. But it's just taking longer than we had hoped for. So we are going to be announcing a delayed opening to October 22nd at the pod, and that's going to go on Facebook tomorrow. And we'll be disseminating that out to as many people as we can, but I just wanted to, since I'm on air, and they're more likely to listen right now than by the time I get to the end of the night, I wanted people to know that it's delayed until October 22nd.
Thank you.
That does not change our groundbreaking, which will be happening this week.
And so in addition to...
Next week, next Tuesday.
I was going to say, wait, what?
Next Tuesday.
I don't have
1
it
week
on the
from
calendar.
today. 1 week, yes. You were going to say?
In addition to, so they got everything out, and they also
The gleaning process is taking place right now, and actually, if anyone by chance was interested on air or in the room on finding a way to buy any of the things that we have removed from the building, they are going to the rebuilding center because we partnered with them to actually cut out windows, remove the wood, take down windows, take down doors, as much as we could get out of the building easily and efficiently. We've done through the rebuilding center. There's also, our artist went through before we brought rebuilding center in first, so that we've actually, the artist pulled out several pieces from the historic building that will now be used as art into the new building. So things like the old banister are going to be in there, some of the doors, some of the windows, stuff like that, where we're actually going to repurpose them into the building to add that historic component to the building.
Excellent. Great. That's nice.
It's really exciting. Yeah. And since she's still pulling up her computer, huge kudos to Layla, Peter, Passarelli, Damian Fodwell, Katie, and then the move team, right? So then you've got Katie, and we've had people who have worked at the library in past years come back to help with the move. We've had 40 volunteers and staff helping us get everything into vans and get over there. And then Layla, Peter, and Damian have been making sure that there's plumbing and that the pods are inspected and that everything's happening on a timely fashion. And it literally has taken every single member of staff to really make this go, and they've done an incredible job.
Wow, great.
So thank you to them as well.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, my turn. We're going to talk about boards and commissions. I'm going to tell you my presentation's not as good as Jordan's. So sorry in advance about that. And also, if you can track along with the PowerPoint, I've tried to clean up my thinking just a little bit since I wrote the staff report. It's the same content, but it flows in a slightly different order. So, and I'm going to have some support here from my colleagues, Ann and Scott, from time to time when we get to the code of conduct in particular. But the three topics that I know I want to check in with you all today is around establishing a code of conduct for our boards, committees, and commissions. The second one is following up to some questions around NDA documentation, agendas, posting of minutes, making sure that those platforms are accessible to folks. So I want to follow up on that topic with you all. And then the third is you'll have a set of annual updates coming up in 2019 from all the boards and commissions. And what do you want to know from them? What kind of questions do you want to ask as folks are coming in? Because after getting input from you all, I can get that out to the staff liaisons and help shape those presentations for maximum benefit, I think, to both you and them. So, at a glance, we have 11 standing boards right now, committees and commissions, and we have 3 limited duration task force. I'll show you in a table in a minute what those are. All of those entities have assigned staff liaisons. We do not have assigned staff liaisons to all our NDAs. That's a distinction. PARB has a city council representative, which is Councilor Parks. The others do not that I'm aware of, except for the budget committee, which has all of you.
Are you including Kellogg Good Neighbor? Oh
yeah, no, you're on Kellogg Good Neighbor. Sorry, thank you, Councilor Abman. So I will amend that and correct it to say PARB and Kellogg Good Neighbor are the 2 that I know that have council representatives assigned to them as well. And I believe that would be because of the intergovernmental nature of them. So because you have, it's 2 county essentially entities, you've got that counselor link. And then all the task forces have some measure of counselors represented on them. So here's my little table. You guys know all these very well. You hear from them, but they've got boards, CUAB, Tree Board, PARB, and Library, 1 commission, Planning Commission, and then all of our committees. I took the, we do have the Milwaukee Center that we serve on as well, but I've kept that off this list. And then our 3 active task forces. So if there's anybody I'm missing, please let me know, but this is who I had tracked.
So do we have direct representative on the Milwaukee Center board?
It's Siri, but we don't have a council counterpart the way we do with the other.
So we appoint her?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe so. Do we appoint? We appoint Siri? Okay.
I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head the duration. It's not a regular term situation, but when there is an opening, I believe this body is the one that appoints for the city. We don't directly manage that board, though. I think that's NCPRD.
We don't have a city staff liaison to it.
The Milwaukee Center Advisory Board?
Yeah.
And we tried to do, we'd kind of lost that connection a little bit, so that was why we had Siri come in and do an actual update with the director this year.
Yeah.
And we'd like to continue that, but if there's any changes you feel like we should be making in terms of how we go about our representative to that board, I think we're all ears.
Yeah.
Do they report to the DAB as well?
Nope.
No.
They report to NCPRD's lead staff.
Okay.
Yeah, but that in the near future may bear more discussion, looking into and seeing, it's our facility. Maybe we need a bit more oversight. I don't know. I'm just suggesting. We seem to always not know very much about what's going on there.
We did bring them in for an annual update this last year.
Yeah.
And staff went out and toured the facility last week and realized it's a great facility, which we knew, but it's also free to us. So we actually may be moving some of our staff meetings over there just to get some more use out of it.
Well, as you know, in the conversations, this is going a little off topic, but in our conversations at PAR, there's a lot of interest in programming around NCPRD decisions, programming at our parks. And I think Milwaukee Center falls into that same framework. So I think there's a conversation to be had with NCPRD about programming, not just at the Milwaukee Center, but given that that's one of the major places where programs occur, community programs occur, and how do we better integrate into that, I think is worth, pursuing with them.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
So these are two of my favorite volunteers who I get to spend a lot of time with on the Parks Board, so I put their picture in. But the main things to know here are boards and committees do not have decision-making authority. Our one commission does. So that's kind of the high-level takeaway from the definitions. So what do we ask them to do? Oh yeah, look. I thought you guys might like that picture. I also don't exactly know where all the pictures are, so there's a lot from Solve event and Cleanup Birthday. So we ask everyone to hold meetings in accordance with public meetings law. That means you're posting them, you're holding them in an accessible location, you have agendas and minutes. We ask them to come to you all once a year. We asked them to fulfill the charge that's set forth in code or by resolution. What were they set up to do? And then, most importantly, they are advisory to you. So they serve this body to help advise on issues that you care about. So maintaining that link is important. And so as we've gone about our work, we had some inquiries from existing BCCs about code of conduct. And so Anne, I take no credit for this, Anne and Scott have done quite a bit of research into what good code of conduct can look like. They've done some outreach to our boards and commissions to see what would be helpful to them. And with that, I think I'll just hand it over to you guys.
Thank you. So back in January of this past year, we started doing a code of conduct for new members who are joining our boards and commissions. But part of what we realized is that never really got disseminated out to the whole board. So there's no understanding that there's a common theme around what we expect of behaviors for us and for others. So we had two different boards come to me and say, I'd like to understand what your expectations are, you, the city, what your expectations are for members of boards, how they should be representing the city when they're out and about, and how do we go through a process if we have a problem with a board member? Because we're not managing them and we don't appoint them. And I said, well, funny enough, I don't either. The council does. So we wanted to come up with something that helps them understand what those behaviors are, what we expect of how we expect them to purport themselves, and then also a process that council could choose to go through if there were disciplinary issues that were arising on some of the boards, so that it's not just a cold cut of you trying to discern, yes, that was acceptable or that's not. We wanted to give people some ground rules just as to what we're asking them to do. So I sent this around to a first draft around to all the boards and commission chairs, just to say, what are your thoughts? Do you guys like this? Would this be helpful? Unanimous support for going down this path. Everyone has been really excited, actually, to have something that explains how we interact with each other. I got a couple of comments back saying, hey, maybe you should think of this. One of the chairs actually wrote back and said, I'd like to know what a process would look like if somebody doesn't fulfill the code of conduct. So you'll see at the end, we've added something that says council would probably go through, and it's not a shall, it is a may. Because you actually reserve the right to just terminate them at any time. You don't have to go through a process. But we wanted to come up with something that people could expect, that if they did A, then B would occur. We try and do that with employees as well. So this is, I don't need your comments tonight. That was not my intention. We've been working on this for the last couple of weeks. If you have thoughts about it, just send me an email, and I'm happy to respond back directly. We are planning on keeping this within the administration so that as it changes, as issues arise, we can tweak it fairly easily and just get it back out. But we are planning on changing the bylaws with all the boards and commissions to call this document out, that there is an acknowledgement that this document exists. So you will actually vote there. So every board and commission will adopt language about this into their board bylaws this year, if it is acceptable to you. So that's sort of our thought process. Did I miss
I'm sorry,
anything?
can you repeat that last bit again?
Sure.
We're going to adopt it, but they're going to vote on whether they're going to include it in their bylaws? What did I hear you say? I'm sorry.
Staff is going to add this language to every bylaw change that we will bring before you this year for discussion. The boards, all the chairs have said they want this,
okay.
and so I'm not concerned about that.
Yeah.
But this is something in the past we haven't had a signature page, so there's nothing that actually says you read this.
Right.
And we'd like to have people actually read
like
this.
The signature page.
So we're thinking of doing this annually. We're at the first meeting in January. Everybody reads it. Everybody signs it. They tear off the back page. They hand it to whoever the person is, just so that there's a reminder that we treat each other with respect and dignity, and that we treat people who come to present at our board meetings with the same respect and dignity. That's kind of the gist of what we're talking about here. You asked a specific question, though, about the adoption. So you don't need to adopt this. We did this in January last year without adoption. We were just rolling it out to people. If you'd like to adopt it, you can. But Scott and I would like some flexibility for a while just to see if people write back and go, this thing needs to be added or this doesn't work. And it's easier if we don't have to bring it back through for resolution adoption.
And with the exception of the disciplinary action removal section, it's all just sort of be nice to each other. Don't violate the law. I mean, it's nothing that's new to policy. And to explain where this document itself came from, it's something that comes around our recorder circles almost annually, and we borrowed most of this from the city of Corvallis. And then the last couple of weeks, Ann has shopped around Tigard's version of it, which there must be an LLC out there model, because the wording in Corvallis and Tigard's were strikingly similar. A little more bullets on one side, a little less on the other side. So this is a mashup between Tigard, Milwaukee, and input from our board chairs that we received to date.
Good.
And by and large, it's, abide by ethics laws. Yeah. There's a link to the ethics laws. We have also, with this, we have a general overview about public records and meetings laws, which is also just cut and paste from state documents with the city's logo on it.
We also realized that there wasn't in all the bylaws a statement that you actually have to attend your meetings.
Right, and which we ran into at the summertime council. May remember we asked for permission to recruit for a budget committee meeting position, which isn't technically vacant, but we ran into this meeting problem, and the budget committee's bylaws are pretty small, pretty short, and they're in the code. Probably because of the nature of the budget committee having state finance laws requiring what it's made up of, but it doesn't say anything about attendance, and nor does general 2.10 of the code about boards and committees generally. So we're growing a list of our own housekeeping items to clean up that section of the code that we might bring forward at some point, and that's to restructure that 2.10. If you've ever looked at it, is heavy and in no particular order. So council visited at this. Mitch brought forward a number of changes, if you might recall, I think earlier last year.
About a year and a half ago.
Yeah. So it's been touched recently, but we can certainly make it better. But that's where this comes from. And a lot of this is just, going on the record, the city saying, be nice to each other. And remember, you represent the city.
Right.
Well,
you do.
and we also had some questions about ethics come out this year. And this points out to them that every single one of them is a public official. You don't have to report into the official Oregon state process, but under law, you are considered a public official. And so we wanted to also make sure that that was clear and that people need to review that document so that they understand that they can't take gifts and they can't do certain things. And they're picking up on it, hit and miss, but we wanted something that was
I think the note that they're public, that their email is public record, I think that's a really important one that isn't really clear to people. Yeah. I do think this planning commission had something in theirs about attendance.
Several of them do. We've learned lately that budget and art mob, I don't believe, do. And generally we don't.
Public safety does, I think.
Public safety does. So individually, the bylaws and but generally, a couple of the big ones don't.
Could we get this PDF, please?
Absolutely.
So I don't have to.
How about Word, so you can actually make edits?
Great.
Okay, we'll send it in Word. We do have one board in particular that would like this sometime from me in the next 3 weeks so that they can actually have everybody sign it, and they want some general ground laying around this. So my ask is that you get back to me in the next 7 days, and then I will make those changes. I'll shop it out one more time to make sure you don't have any questions or concerns with the final version, and then I'll send it out. Okay?
Good.
And then you're thinking if we did go forward with cleanup on that chapter, which one, I forget which one it is now.
2.10.
It would have general things like attendance would be in the code or not necessarily? Are you looking at updating
They
all
should
bylaws?
be maybe in the
or how?
bylaws, you think?
We have a lot of work to do. Kelly and I have been talking about this now for 6 months. It's on the list of things we need to do. I don't have a perfect answer. What I can tell you is if you notice things, as you're talking to people over the course of the year, or as you're reading this, or as you're thinking about things, or as you look at the code, email me. I'm putting them all on a list, and we will at least try and get a response back to you when we bring forward a package, probably in February, just to make sure that we're catching things as much as we can, but it's we thought we got it all a year and a half ago.
So my hope, which I haven't necessarily gotten approved, is that the bylaws would get updated as you're having the boards and commissions come to you. So you're doing that bylaws update then anyway, and what we would do is adopt or include by reference the code of conduct. So when we do any other bylaws tweaks, so if that board or commission is missing an attendance requirement, then we can add an attendance requirement when we do that. Yeah. So you would move ahead with the boards and commissions, en masse right now, get the input, go ahead and provide it to folks so they can use it now. But the bylaws would happen when they come do their updates to you. And we know we're going to need to add the bylaws piece or the code of conduct piece to everyone. Does that sound right to you guys? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Well, this is, for me, timely because just yesterday at Metro, we were internally discussing these very same issues that a lot of our committee members and board members they're not thinking about the ethics rules, and we've had some situation come up recently. We don't know that they get training. They do get a piece of paper like this, but we've been discussing how we can make it a little more known for them as well. So I'm seeing it in my day job, the very same issues you're dealing with. Although I am curious about, it sounds to me from behind the scenes, without getting into detail, that there's some issues on some of our boards.
Correct.
Not just attendance, but apparently the way things are. So I don't know what the solution is to how that information gets conveyed to us, but certainly I don't want someone on the board that's not doing the kinds of things they should be doing on the board or outside.
Well, so there's a couple of things to think about. One is, one infraction, unless it's egregious, shouldn't be enough to get you kicked off of a board. And there wasn't really a discussion with board chairs about what their role is in managing some of those issues. So that's the first piece, is there needed to be a process for them to even assert if there was a problem. And that was one of the struggles. I know this thing isn't working. I don't know why, and I don't know how to manage it. Can you help me figure out how to manage it? We've outlined a process in here that includes notifying all of council on the second time you have to deal with an issue. The mayor gets notified of several of these, namely because he's the appointee. He's the person who appoints the members to all of you. So we've been bringing him in when we've had problems because he is technically the person who is appointing. We're happy to notify all of you if you would like more information as some of these. I know all of you know one of them because I've had ad nauseum conversations with you about that, but the others may or may not be anything.
Okay.
But this process will allow them clarity. For instance, this also gives me some cover. We were doing an art selection for the library. We had members on the art committee. They don't know purchasing law as well as we do. And even though we had talked to them about it, they made a decision to talk to one of the people who was bidding in during the bid process. I had to take them off because you can't do that. So it's stuff like that where if we can at least tell them what the ethics rules are, then they can learn some of that. And they didn't mean to do it. They wanted to be on the selections, and they would have never, they would have never done that on purpose. But by giving them this in advance, they can prepare themselves to make sure that everything's on the up and up. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Did you have something you were going to? Oh, I thought you had something you were going to say a second ago. Okay.
I think so.
I've heard from the board chairs who have brought me problems in the past that this will help them significantly. So I'd like to give them a chance by using this document for 6 months to see if that actually negates any reason for future conversations with council.
We also did, so we did sort of a, what was it, 20 minutes with Tim at our budget meeting, and I think we said that we would have that video available.
The video's not great because it was the train night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what we do have is he's come up with the top 10. I handed that off to Justin, and Justin is working on coming up with a training that we'll do to all the boards and commissions, kind of hitting on those main topics. A lot of that's included in here, but it is on his list.
Okay, good.
Because I actually thought that was exceptional. I thought the training itself was really helpful.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing head nodding that we can keep working on code of conduct. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, neighborhood associations. So we have been thinking about, what can we do to give the NDA some tools to help make sure that they can have agendas and minutes posted, and with the effort of achieving our vision of being an inclusive and engaging a broad cross-section of the people who live in Milwaukee. So I think this will work. I don't know. It's not going to work. So I went to follow up on our website conversation. It may not take me to our website. I actually went after we'd had a conversation at the retreat on this topic to just see, what do our NDA website pages look like? They're pretty good. Actually, when I went to my NDA webpage, it was almost impossible to find the agenda in minutes, and I got to them pretty quickly on everybody's, which I'm not going to make you look at. But overall, I actually think the work that's been put in by the NDAs themselves to generate the content, and the work of our team here internally, and mainly Jason, to get those individual NDA web pages more usable has been good. I also went and checked. We do have quite a few folks posting their minutes and agendas in a pretty timely fashion. What we decided, I worked with Jason to see if we gave them better templates, if we gave them better tools, would that help? And so he made new, shiny agenda templates, and then an easy-to-use minutes template, which isn't going to pull up for me right here, but I can send it to you. And it's just sort of like a check the box, like make it easier to take minutes and post that. And so we sent that to them. We told them you don't necessarily have to use this template, but it was a nice reminder to say you are having public meetings. We need to make sure that that you're posting information about them. And so I think it's where we go from here. So when we were asking ourselves, how do we make sure that our NDAs are helping be more inclusive. The things that popped up for us is we'd like to know, how are you fostering community events and gathering opportunities? We actually have, again, like the neighborhood concerts. I mean, there's a lot going on that's outside the NDA meetings themselves that provides a place for people to come and gather. And then also, how are you sharing information promoting diverse participation? So that was an idea we had of something we could do to ask NDAs if we wanted to pose some questions to them about how are you being more inclusive. The other idea had come up when we talked about tying the NDA funding itself to, some time frame, by, 2020, whatever time frame we want to set, you will have posted, agendas and minutes at this rate, and we would kind of set that up, but use the NDA funding as a bit of a trigger to make sure that those documents are being posted. So I think I want to check in with you all tonight and see if that's still something of interest. The other item that's not on here is frankly true engagement is probably training. It's probably a little bit more in depth where we actually kind of had a training for our NDAs, our leadership in the NDAs about what do we mean by being inclusive? What do we mean by reaching out? What does it mean to have a safe space for anyone to come to? We're not quite there to be able to host that kind of a training right now. I think it's something we could potentially do a year out. But I think that's another thing to consider is what do we want to get to? I think we can get to agendas and minutes. I think we're doing better than I thought we were doing. We can get more of that posted, but I also think if we want to go much further than that, that might actually be more of a training exercise. So I think this is more just now to open it up to you all and see what would be helpful in terms of setting expectations and getting deliverables from the NDAs with these documents.
That sounds like the right track to me. I mean, just what you laid out. I mean, I think some of the initial, at least for me, one of the things that was mentioned as a potential obstacle to creating sort of an accessible meeting was that it was being held sort of in a private home, or things weren't getting noticed properly, and that could, I mean, obviously it comes with concerns about ADA accessibility and also just frankly people feeling comfortable going into a stranger's home for the first time when they might want to bring a contentious issue to their NDA. But I can also appreciate that, it might bring up some additional questions or challenges for the NDA, to really actually, be on the same page with us in terms of, what does it mean to be inclusive? What does it mean to be accessible? And I think that your idea about training, before we take that step, that makes a lot of sense to me. That's. Okay. But bare minimum, I mean, I'm glad to hear that we're doing better than you thought on agendas and minutes. But I definitely think that that's sort of I think that, that should be baseline. That's baseline. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sort of curious, the devil's in the details on a thing like that. I can imagine reactions towards some real punitive, well, if your agendas and your minutes aren't in by 7 days after the meeting, then no funds for you, right? They're going to freak out. So what are we thinking about in that realm? If you're going to tie their funding to,
I think it would be, well, number one, I'm not sure you have to take that step right now. I think it's an option for you. I think you may get a little more traction with a carrot than a stick on the materials, which is why we've been trying to make the tools a little easier to use. But if we were to do it, I would recommend that it's on an annual. But it would be a long lead time. You say, I'm going to be asking for this, for you to have posted agenda and minutes at all. I mean, I don't know that necessarily within a certain time frame. Their bylaws probably actually dictated to be on a certain time frame. I know my PARP ones do. And then we would assess that, and if they didn't meet that threshold, it would be in the next year. But we can make it however we want. I mean, again, it's whatever objective you want to hit. I don't know that you have to do that right now, but I will definitely go down that course of action if we think that's what's needed.
So do they send them to Jason? Is that what they do for posting? They don't have the ability to post themselves, do they?
I think they give them to him. That's a really good question. I don't think they have the right to. They don't have access to just post. I think they give it. They either give it to Jason. They may just send it to Webmaster, which actually goes to like 3 or 4 different people. But that way, Hannah or Jason or Jordan or whoever's there can. But we don't have any
worries that those get lost or anything. I mean,
I don't, but. It could. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I think that's part of what we should find out too, is if people think they are sending them in and we're not receiving them, then that's an issue on our end, right? That we'd need to resolve. How are we Have you heard of anybody not getting through?
No,
Okay.
no, but I mean, and it's been a while since I looked at them, but last time I looked at them, they were pretty darn sparse.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, can we do something to, can Jason build it into maybe his Friday emails that the last Friday of the month, remember, get your minutes in, or, remember, get your agenda to me, or, just making sure, I mean, it goes along with the templates, making sure the process is clear to all of them, who they send it to.
And in full disclosure, I did not go deep. I didn't go way back. I kind of looked and saw, okay, look, this looks like I got agendas, I got minutes, so it is scanned. So if I went back and pulled the metrics, we could be doing worse than I think. But
I haven't looked lately, but several months ago, it was not good.
We could do reminders. Like I said, we can do reminders and nudges. I mean, that was kind of our, our last set of that. Maybe why I saw more recently is because we just did the push out of the agenda and the minutes templates, and then that helped incentivize people to use them.
Well, and a lot of them were off over the summer, so maybe it's nice. It's like fall, and it's like, let's get on a new pattern. Let's get on a.
I don't think that addresses your concern about making sure people know, making sure that they're having the event in a public space, like a publicly accessible space. So that's another thing we still have to follow up on.
But I think at least, just if the agenda, if we can get to the, 100% on agendas, I think, that would be a step. It was such a good step.
Yeah. So which NDAs are meeting in private homes now?
I'm not going to point any fingers here in this, but I have heard of that happening very recently, and it concerned me.
For a regular NDA meeting, not just to some subcommittee or something?
No.
I might ask for a Scott Stoffer ruling too on my assessment of agenda and meeting like NDAs and how, if I'm wrong or right on that, Kelly's out of whack. No, all right. Because he has a pretty high standard.
And I was going to say, when they're listed in the pilot, it looks like they're all in public
Well, sometimes
places.
I understand. I mean, I think that probably, and I think that this was the case, that the regular meeting place was not available, or it was.
Yeah.
And so I think that happens sort of on a one-off, but it does concern me. I think that generally is, and maybe the Milwaukee Center is another place that we should be considering for meetings, if that's a space that's available. But we do have places, we have the Pond House, and maybe it's not in your neighborhood, but it's public, it's accessible, it's something that you can work with the city on to make sure that, this is sort of a neutral ground. If you don't have a place in your neighborhood, in my neighborhood, I think that the Milwaukee Cafe or the Bottle Shop, I think that they're maybe questionable about whether they're going to be able to continue to have theirs there in the evenings. So I know that that's an issue for our NDAs, but I also know that there are spaces available that we should be using.
Is Stefan the chair of Linwood?
Llewellyn.
So they were having a hard time.
Yeah.
And they've moved up, just so people watching know, they've moved up to the Chapel Theater to try and use that space. But they were really struggling to find a node as well.
Yeah, I know that's an issue. And I obviously, I would never, I don't think that council would use such a harsh stick that if you had one meeting, over the course of the year that was, not ADA accessible, that's not my intent here at all. It's really just more about, as a practice, these are kind of the guidelines on what the expectations are.
But it's an interesting point about Llewellyn, because they went to the school for years, and once they moved to an eatery, a place where somebody could get a glass of wine, their attendance went,
yeah.
And so they didn't want to go back to the school when they lost Milwaukee Cafe.
Which speaks to the strength of the idea of neighborhood hubs and how critical those are.
Would it be, we could do a near-term open and accessible kind of meetings. We do it at an NDA leadership meeting, I think would be a good forum for that. And just say, hey, this is what it looks like when, you make sure we have a welcoming meeting space for your NDA meeting. And then we could actually run the numbers instead of me just scanning the website, and then come back, at the time, whatever time you all think is best, and kind of look at the numbers themselves about, what did we see in terms of agendas posted and minutes and completion of that, and then make a decision at that point about what you want to ask for the year ahead. We could take that kind of a phased approach if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I see no point to looking back at this point, but just doing what we can to, reinforce and remind, send out ticklers, whatever,
I think it should be, framed as, let's do better. How can we help you do better? And so I like the idea of taking it to the neighborhood, the leader group, over a course of, a few meetings to talk about these issues and get their feedback, tell us, what are the challenges? I mean, we know some of them, but there might be others that we're not thinking about.
Okay, that's helpful.
How often do you meet with leadership?
Quarterly.
That's good.
Yeah, we're due for another one here soon.
And those are venues where, as Councilor Beatty knows, if there's a policy topic that you'd like to talk to the NDA leadership about, that is a great venue for it. She'll be on there in January for about 20 minutes talking about an issue.
And I just ask, if you are hearing concerns about people that feel unwelcome, just continue to either send them to me or send them to Ann, who'll give them to me so that we know and can kind of address them on a one-off basis as needed as well. Okay. So this is what do you want to ask people when they come talk to you? So what you tend to do, I believe, is ask, what did you accomplish? What are your success stories from the last year? So that would be 2018. And then what do you want to work towards? What are your goals for 2019? The slight tweaks that I'm seeing, if you might be interested in, is to also ask how those goals are tied to the vision and your council goals. It doesn't mean they have to be necessarily, but it's just a platform. I think it's a nice opportunity to say,
Good.
Again, PARB is the one I know the best, right, because I'm with them. But, Milwaukee Bay Park, it's a council goal. They're doing a ton of work on it. So just making that connection really clear. And then I think it's just always nice to show people the vision and kind of see how their work connects to the vision. There's a lot in there. I don't think people are going to have a hard time seeing themselves in it. It's just asking them that question. The second one, I know we've looked at the bylaws and we make tweaks to the bylaws, but I don't know how often we've actually looked at sort of what the group, if you go to the code language, what were you formed to do? And I've had to be kind of staring at that a little bit lately. Okay, what is the charge? What we've been asked to do? And
it's in your staff report, right?
Yeah, I actually gave you a big attachment of everything I could find. There are actually some. I think Kellogg Good Neighbor is by resolution. It's not in code, so I don't know if I have Kellogg Good Neighbor in there. But so that's the second one, which is we should discuss how interested you are in that one. The other one is are there any other boards or commissions working on similar issues to you? I know at PARB that has come up with Tree Board. It's come up actually with Art Mob a lot. There's in parks themselves, the role that art is playing in Milwaukee Bay Park or in different places, and how do those bodies work together or communicate with each other. Tree planting, that actually brought in the NDA, right? So that was a Tree Board sponsored or working on Arbor Day, which involved planting a tree in a park, that the neighborhood association cared very much about where that tree went because that's the space they used to hold their concerts. So you've got a few different entities kind of there together, and I think this is just an ongoing effort. Just how do we encourage folks to be talking to each other? Are we telling people at the right time the right information so that everybody feels included and involved in things? And then after you kind of go through those issues, I think you have a good set of things to know. Do I have any changes I need to make to the bylaws themselves? Is there anything about what you want to be working on or your goals for your organization or your board or commission that's different than that charge? And then you can talk through it. So I think I talked a little bit about overlap in the staff report, in overlapping jurisdictions and role clarity. I'm kind of moving away from that just a little bit. I don't know how helpful that is. I'll show you a slide in a minute about like sidewalks and kind of all the different people and entities that touch sidewalks, and I don't even think I have them all in there. But before I go to that slide, if it's helpful, I just want to see what you think about this. It's kind of a lot, so you may want to pare it back, but in terms of the topics that people would kind of include in a presentation to you, how does this look?
So we always ask them, are there any changes needed to the bylaws? And in fact, most of them come to us with, mock-ups of what they want to see. Is there a way to be more proactive the other way on that and say, check your bylaws? It should include, make sure you have the code of conduct listed in there. It should include, what am I trying to say? Like attendance requirements, whatever. I mean, and I'd really like to see the bylaws be more uniform for all of them to, so that,
well, they have different charges.
No, I know that, but you can do that. I mean, that's not an issue, but the format and so if you pick up any bylaws, that you're going to see this, and this, and this, and where you're going to see them in this document. And then this is why they're formed, and this is what their charge is, and and their work plan should not be part of the bylaws. That's not a bylaw function. That's separate. So they wouldn't even, they wouldn't have to have a lot of detail on why they're formed or what they are or whatever. Just kind of a mission statement type of thing.
Well, I agree with you, Wilda, and but to your point, Mark, with their different charges, I don't understand why the bylaws would be that different anyway.
No,
bylaws are about attendance
themselves.
And who's the officer and how you elect the officer and whether there's a vacancy.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
The charges should be in the code or the resolution that passed them. I don't understand how a bylaw would add to that.
Yeah.
So I think they should be more uniform. I haven't looked at them all. I know the planning commissions because I had to use those, but so if you've looked at them or if others, are they just all over the place?
Oh, I remember that from last year when they came to us.
Yeah,
they're all over the place. Yeah.
But I don't think that they've ever really been offered any kind of a template, so I think that would be...
I think that's it. And so if that something simplified could be developed, because you are absolutely correct too that bylaws should contain only certain pieces of information, and then the actual plan of work and how they're functioning in that is a whole separate document, which will be different for every single committee. But
So you don't think there should be any, what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm mishearing, in essence, the bylaws would be virtually identical because we're not addressing
the substance,
what they do. We're just saying you have to show up every month to the meeting.
You have a president, you have this many officers.
4-year terms, you have, whatever.
Exactly.
That's the bylaws.
That's what bylaws do.
Think of bylaws. And like if you go to the state has standard bylaws that anyone can download for organizations, and they're the same because they're just really, it's the mechanical operation. It has nothing to do with your charge or how do you fill a vacancy or when do you meet.
I guess I would still, I could see a bylaws that had the first paragraph being, this is the charge of this committee, and like 2 or 3 sentences, and then
that's what we're saying.
Then all the cut and dried stuff that's all the same.
And it actually might be nice for them to see.
On my chamber background, so I had 8, 10, whatever committees at any one time. But the bylaws of all of them started with, here's the mission statement of the chamber, and here's the mission statement of this group. So a couple of sentences about what it was charged to do, and then the rest of it was total template. You elect these people, they serve for this long, everybody serves for this long, blah, blah, blah. You meet, blah, 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 whatever, those kind of things. And for us, it would be a little bit more because you'd have to put the things in about, the code of conduct or the open meeting laws and ethics. But it's easy. I think, I may be wrong, but I think it's more or less easily done once you develop a template for that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not necessarily opposed to that concept. I just, if we're going down that road, then we're going to have to change what we review each year, because like when I was reading through the Planning Commission, this, I guess this is an MMC, right? The stuff that's in here.
Yeah.
This is pretty antiquated, and it certainly doesn't speak to the vision. So I think then if we've got a code of conduct that's basically cut and dried and it is what it is, they're not really needing to review the code of conduct every year because
No.
it is what it is.
Well, except
But
for new people.
Perhaps what they need to be reviewing every so often is what their charge is, partly to remind them what their charge is,
Right.
but also partly because sometimes their charge is not going to make sense anymore, and maybe something else makes more sense, and maybe now there is a new committee that's doing something that you used to do, but that's not really your main charge, so you don't need to do that anymore. I mean, then if we're gonna go to a cut and dried.
Well, we're going to talk about Kelly has been stepping back. I have not been stepping back from the overlap of some of the boards and commissions in terms of where we don't have role clarity about who's doing what. I think that you're talking about something that's really important. I just don't think it's probably in your bylaws.
Yeah, Mark, you're absolutely right about what you said, but all that information's in the code or whatever. You know, the bylaws are different, but you're right, and they should be reviewing their charge and thinking about it, and we should be updating it too.
It's like when PSAC changed its focus, you know, and then like when the tree board came on, so that meant things that PARB was no longer maybe doing, or when the Riverfront Task Force went away, and now, you know.
PARB's picking some of that up.
Yeah, exactly. So that affects that kind of thing.
Yeah, I noticed in here that the library board and PSAC have really similar charges.
I noticed that too.
And it's like almost identical, their charges.
Oh, wow, that's funny. Yeah.
No, you're, yes, I think is the answer, that the bylaws cleanup could be pretty straightforward. And I know that actually a lot of work was put towards it a couple of years ago, and it would be doing round 2. And I agree, it's largely template. How do you function? The charges, there's a lot there. I mean, I think that's where this is coming in part because I've struggled as a staff person to try to go back and kind of sort through who do I need to go to in what order for what things and why.
Yeah.
And going to the charges, and some of those haven't been touched for a long time, the code language.
Even the code language could be standardized to some degree as to the formatting of, you know, they'll have different charges, but a lot of that stuff will be the same, could be. It's a lot of work to fix that code. It is a mess, but.
Well, it's interesting, the two that you say are alike are the two most recently edited.
Well, I think he's making a joke.
It's a joke.
Because the library board.
Because it was copy and paste.
The library board wasn't put in there.
The library board, we don't actually know what the library board does according to this.
But it
Probably
PSAC.
Sorry. I put them, you're harassing
me. You put them, they're two PSAC.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're right.
I can't believe Lisa didn't catch that.
I think that there needs to be some code cleanup too, and we do need to talk about that some. And we don't have a ton of clarity from all of you as on some of those overlapping places. And I think that our boards are struggling through some of that as a staff, and I don't know how we enter that conversation.
Well, to some degree, I don't think you're going to get away completely from overlap, right? Because on the sidewalks is a great example, right? That's something that's absolutely a PSAC charge. But as you're doing that, you're affecting the street trees, which is absolutely a tree board charge. And then when you are talking about trees in a park, you've just overlapped two other.
Actually, in a lot of those, I mean, let's use tree as an example. So if we're talking about your SAFE program, we actually will have a process that the tree board will adopt that we will go through in order to accomplish the goals that have been outlined by PSAC, right? Like, and many of those won't be in PARB properties.
Sure.
So in a weird way, the hope is that you get to a system that works. What we're seeing sometimes is that even with a system, people are wanting to get more heavily involved in issues that maybe don't actually fall within the jurisdiction of their board. And so that's more the issue. And Kelly and we actually went out to lunch yesterday. We talked for an hour about this, trying to figure out how to have this discussion tonight. It slows us down a lot when there's not clarity for some of these boards, because we don't go to the right one, or we go to all of them and they're in disagreement and they don't know how to come to an agreement. So there's nuances in this that I just wanted to make sure you all were aware of. I can give you an example, and we've talked about a few of these, but Adam Street Connector is going to be one where we're talking about it for PARB, because there's a question of whether or not, even though it's right of way, PARB would have say over property in that location. You could end up with people wanting to talk about trees at the same location.
Design and landmarks could be.
Design and landmarks actually legally is tied into that process. Same with Planning Commission.
And art mob, because it's actually public art that's involved in it.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, there are certain projects that are just, it's just going to happen.
Well, and it's also okay that they don't agree. I mean, let's get back to what the committees do. They advise us. We decide. So it's okay that they have disagreement, because then we get to evaluate those disagreements.
But that does sort of create a process that we haven't to date ever done, which is there's a meeting where PARB and DLC and whoever are there.
They don't want to do that.
We're there.
They want us to go to 5 different meetings.
They want the city council to go to 5 different meetings?
No, they want staff to go to 5 different meetings.
What do they get to decide?
And have the discussion with them, and we can do that. But I'm just letting you know that some of these issues it's going to slow us down. And as long as you guys are engaged with the process, that I'm going to be going to 4 different or 5 different committees on some of these projects, then I'm fine. And as I also disclosed to these guys, I actually haven't gotten a comment from you this year that says you're going too slow. None of you have looked at me this year and said, you're not getting this project done fast enough, unless it was, there's one project and it's because of all the issues we've had on the site. So I don't think it's common. I don't think you're going to come to me and say everything is going too slow. But I want all of us to be aware that it could slow things down. And I want us to have an open and transparent conversation that if that starts to happen, that this has been a conscious decision that we are slowing things down to make sure we're going to all the different groups. So I'm great with that. I'm just having a conscious decision right now that that's kind of the process we're going through.
So this is seat of the pants. It's not
that's fine.
Deeply thought through.
Yeah.
But having staff chase around to 4 different meetings and then try and regurgitate what happened in 4 different meetings to us so that then we can make a decision doesn't seem like the ideal process.
It's not. And honestly, some of the boards we don't always think of as being involved in a process, and then they get really offended, and then we are, even if we went to 4 boards,
You went to the wrong 4.
We went to the wrong 4 boards. And so then we get caught into this position of being, of staff, and I don't mean me, because for the most part, I'm not going to the boards, but staff going, but I went to 4 boards, and I talked to 2 NDAs, and I literally went out, and I talked to as many people, and you're telling me my engagement wasn't enough. Mm-hmm. And it's hard for them to know what thing is going to light somebody off if they don't see it up front, because they don't sit in your seats or my seats, and we often don't even know until after the fact. We miss it too.
So couldn't the process be more, I mean, on these projects, we kind of, don't we have a sense, we have a sense for which committee or board is sort of primary, and no, you don't think with SAFE, PSEC is clearly primary.
Here's an interesting
This is primary on the Southdown Town Plaza, for example. DLC maybe, but.
Well, so then we assign a primary, and then at that meeting where they will be discussing South Downtown, the other sort of peripheral boards are invited to that meeting, and they can choose to then come and give their input at a.
People get offended that they weren't chosen as the primary.
Well, that's just a function of, that's just logistics. We just have to have a process.
I totally agree with you. I actually love this conversation, and it's getting to, in part I'm doing this so you see what I've been trying to do, because I've been trying to walk staff through this. We've been guessing which one's the primary. We've been targeting. I had this great breakfast about a month and a half ago with Lauren from DLC. She's incredible, if you haven't met her. And we were chit-chatting, and she said, I've been spending all my time at DLC on this. And what I feel bad that we've never tackled the heritage tree ordinance.
He said, I have great news for you. You are not the primary on that ordinance, actually. We have a tree board that is working on that. And she goes, really? He said, yeah, they've been working on it for several months, and if you'd like, we can have them come present to you just what they're planning on doing. You can put any input in, and then you'll be done. You don't have to worry about it again. She was thrilled. So sometimes they clean up by themselves. Like, I can find that little niche.
So do we need some kind of informational meeting where all those boards, or at least all the leadership of all the boards, come together and meet with us and you, and we talk, and we say, here's what this is doing and here's what that's doing? And
I like that idea a lot.
I mean, you know,
I don't like my incremental annual checkup approach.
I do like her incremental, and I'm not saying that that's going to solve it, but I think if we at least have an annual meeting with all the chairs
of the
boards and commissions and with you present, we could talk about, not all projects are equal.
Right. Sure.
You guys have 5 or 6 big projects where I think that if we talked about them and you all could negotiate kind of what the role of everybody, you know, like they start talking about it and you go, well, I didn't really think you'd be that interested in that. And we've got 4 other boards, and maybe we could, I think it starts helping negotiate some of that.
Yeah. Right, and then things like, you got another group working on heritage trees, everybody knows that and everybody understands it and goes, oh, God, I don't have to do that anymore. Okay.
To worry about that.
You do it.
Well, so, looking at this graphic,
And I mean,
South Downtown is yeah, it's complicated, but the rest of SAFE, to me, I mean, yes, there are going to be some places where SAFE goes by a park, and so
or through
CARB
a park.
is going to have
Kronberg.
Kronberg, okay. But the bulk of SAFE, well, I mean, Kronberg is being treated as a park project. I mean, is PSAC even involved in Kronberg?
Well, it's PSAC money that's going into...
But I mean,
they prioritized it, but now once it's been prioritized, they're probably no longer.
PSAC money and a park grant.
Right. Yeah, it's a variety of things, but from you know.
Look how complicated.
But definitely, definitely tree board. I mean, that's.
But it seems to me, well, that's what I'm getting at. Is it seems to me most of SAFE is going to be PSAC and tree board.
Right.
It's not going to be PARB, except in
until
certain parts.
Gets really upset that.
Yes, although I will tell you,
in letter, and they say this is the most important thing for you to be looking at, and we go, but
this is where I need that the annual conversations. I think will be helpful because PARB has been interested not only in park space but open space.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they told us that. I mean, we learned, you know, this, I mean, I think this came from a lesson that we learned, which was, you know, with the library construction, we thought we were, you know, meeting with
the right people.
The right people. We thought we had assigned, you know, like certain, and then we did. We heard from, you know, PARP that they really wanted to be, you know, asked about, you know, sort of stuff that wasn't in the park, right? And so that is going to happen, I think, more than we think. And that's, but if we can have this conversation, first, then maybe those feelings won't be so hurt because they will have been given the opportunity. Okay, you know. Particularly
if when we know we have a big project, right? Let's take South Downtown as a project. This is coming up. These are the plans. This is where we're headed. Okay, we need to pull together whatever we want to call this meeting, the leadership meeting.
Yeah.
Right?
Scott's already offered to take this on.
Got to do a leadership meeting on the South Downtown. So all the boards and committees, chairs show up. We're all there. We talk about that project. Who thinks that they need to be involved? Who thinks they absolutely don't want to be involved, right? And what are the issues you're seeing with the concept and the plan? So then we know.
Yeah.
Or at least.
I guess only thing I'll add is I think there's, you know, if you've been involved in kind of the larger planning efforts and projects, they have an engagement strategy almost of themselves. That's why we have some task forces, and you pull and you go through that process at that point to staff up almost an advisory body just for that thing. So I think that's almost on some of the bigger things that happens. It's just then what's the expectation level for ongoing engagement with are we asking the people that participate to report back and to keep their respective advisory bodies in the loop? I used to do that.
I think we leave that to them at sort of at this leadership meeting, you know, if on a project, so say it's South Downtown, and you have the leadership meeting, and then you ask them, you know, okay, so if we're assigning this group, this committee is primary, and these other ones then are sort of, you know, do you want to, if you want to be involved, are you assigning a liaison from your group, and then is that person just, you know, coming in? Because I think the idea of having going to 4 separate meetings, you know, and then trying to bring that doesn't work. I think the better way to go about it is, okay, so if you decide that tree board is primary, and maybe not for South Downtown, but if part or whoever is primary, then the liaison for these 3 other boards that also want to be involved, they go to that meeting.
Right.
That would be hugely helpful. And we as staff can make a recommendation to you as to who we are thinking that is, right? Before we do the meeting, I can come up with a list of the top 10 projects and who, after talking to staff, they think should be sort of the board that they're going to be working with.
Just the same way we assign a staff lead, we'd have a recommended.
Well, so maybe
advisory body
to sort of kick this whole thing off,
Sure.
maybe we should just do a leadership meeting.
Yeah, a big
Talk
major
about
one,
all
just
the projects, all the
say this
big
is-
projects that we have going on, and try and get a sense of, okay, on this project, who thinks that they need to have input? On this project, who thinks they need to have input? Because we've got like 12 big projects going right now.
Yeah, and I think that the only thing I would change in that statement is I can't have, if what you're saying, what I've heard is correct, then I can't send staff to 4 different board meetings. So if you feel like you need to have say, then this board is going to be hearing this. If you'd like to participate, then this is how you do it. It's not that we created a shortcoming by not coming to your board meeting. It means that this was the board that was assigned. And if you want to engage with them, this is how you do it.
Because we do a really good job of making sure that, for the most part, you know, there's not a lot of conflict in scheduling. We try to make sure that everybody's spread out really well, so that, you know, that could happen. If you are on tree and you want to be involved in PSAC, then, you know, if PSAC's primary, then, you know, when they're meeting, you can go to that, because tree isn't meeting at the same time.
I think, okay, so there's the primary, secondary kind of concept, and creating an opportunity to identify that up front so that you know who it is, and that other people are notified if they want to be engaged. Here's your kind of initial gathering of leadership, and say this is a conversation we should have because we've got a lot going on and we have some overlapping jurisdiction, and let's talk about how we want to manage that. My one request, I guess, and this is me speaking on behalf of Jason, I get a little concerned about a standing entity that that brings all the leaders together, because we've seen it be almost like a de facto clearinghouse, almost like a community advisory committee that has everybody in it, and they meet once a month, and then everybody just comes to that and then does a bullet version of their project, and everybody nods, you know, and it moves, and it becomes sort of this
independent body.
It's an independent body, but it also doesn't end up serving the function very well ultimately, because it doesn't work. So I think it's great. I'm just telling you, it's not what you've asked for. So you've asked for kind of an initial conversation to kind of chart this out and to kind of think about how we want to make sure the right people are engaged at the right time. Just if it starts going down the path of a regular standing thing, then I might have some concerns, is all I want to put out there.
I wasn't thinking of a regular standing committee. I was thinking of something that might be once a year.
I think once to twice a year probably makes sense. And just so everybody's clear, I'm staffing this. So for all the night meetings and for all the things that staff has going on, I don't want to add another meeting for my staff. I made the mistake of calculating how many hours most of my managers are at night meetings this last month. It's not pretty. So I'm going to staff it. This is going to be, because I also have the most information about all the projects, and that'll help us get the information out correctly. But I agree with Kelly. This can't become its own body. This becomes a meeting that we have.
No, I wouldn't see it that way at all.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, and so in that regard, is it a separate meeting, or is it just dedicating one of our study sessions to this?
I think
it could be that.
I think we could totally do that. Let's plan on, I think December is still somewhat okay. No, it's not. It's probably going to be January, which is New Year. I'll clear January. I'll figure it out. Let's try and do it in January. It's the right time of year to do it. We'll have a new council member on board. So, sorry. Have fun without me. But I really appreciate this part of the conversation. staff works really hard to please you in particular. They care a lot about what you guys think. So setting them up for success is really important to me, and this will help them be set up for success.
Yeah.
Thank you. It is helpful. I guess I have one quick question. Do we want to kind of hold on board and commission updates and have this January discussion? Or do you want to just keep going through updates, because you've got tree board coming and PARB coming, I guess. So those are the ones that are coming up to you in November and
Peter
November.
has his.
I think if you guys are thinking that bylaws can be pretty cut and dry, that they're more or less the same for everybody, maybe we should create a bylaws template, float that around to all the leadership, and say, okay, we're thinking about changing the bylaws to this with, if there's some weird thing in your bylaws, like you have to have an arborist on your, whatever.
We can even actually, I can't do it quickly, but we can probably even do most of the template update for them just to say this is what it would look like.
And then, but when we do the updates with each committee, we want to be looking at in the code what their charge is, because that's what I think needs work.
In addition to.
And you want to do that, go down the regular scheduled path.
Yeah,
of that
otherwise,
now,
I can't imagine just trying to do all that at once.
And
That
then
sounds
have
crazy.
a separate discussion that's a gathering of everyone, just to talk about overlapping,
Like,
projects
give
that
them a
involve.
heads up that we're talking about, because particularly the Planning Commission, that's 2 pages of a lot of pretty outdated stuff.
I don't know, who we have is tree board and PARB between now and the end of the year, and it sounds like that's one of the more.
DLC too.
Oh, maybe DLC.
And Planning Commission.
Yep.
And, we have all 4 of those?
Oh, I actually think you also have like KGNC. Like, I think we actually have 4 or 5 of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I do think the tree board PARB thing is probably, one of the more, nuanced ones that this January discussion is going to help, and I almost feel like it would be more useful to put their individual ones off till after that.
I actually would agree.
So move PARB and tree board to next year, and
the others can stay.
The others stay.
Yeah.
On the schedule.
I think that's true. I think that's where it started a lot of this conversation, and it is very specific to the policy. They bring their annual goals to you. So those goals are going to tie to the projects that we talk to them about. I think Councilor Beatty's right. I think that's going to create.
Well, and at that point, we might be closer to being ready to have a conversation around, and if we're going to do it, a sustainability committee, which is also going to overlap with a lot of the things PARB thinks about now.
Well, so that gets to one of the, your question about this is I was wondering
martini glass back?
No, that one. Because I was going to say, don't we want a sustainability question in here, but you're thinking of a separate sustainability committee.
Oh,
we're going to talk about that.
Too bad.
No, I get to talk about it.
The Climate Action Plan Committee was recommending that there be an ongoing committee that's working on that, because that's a fairly big lift. It's a lot of stuff. It's a thing that there's a lot of dynamic change occurring within the, let's call it an industry, for lack of a better, and to have a group of people that's A, familiar with the Climate Action Plan, and B, engaged with the bigger world in that, seems like it would be helpful. And also, in their minds, I think, and maybe correct me if that wasn't your impression, but I think there was also a feeling of wanting to make sure that this carried through, that it didn't, we make this nice plan, we roll it up and stick it on a shelf somewhere.
Well, that's why we're hiring a person, right?
Sure.
And so why isn't that person just working with the different committees that exist rather than creating a new committee?
The mayor and I have gone back and forth on this a lot. I'm going to disclose where I am on all of it. So the first is, I don't disagree that we need a group of people who care about this. We need some volunteers who are going to go out and talk to businesses, who are going to engage with the community, who go staff booths, and who do a lot of that. Those are all administrative functions. What I've asked Peter to do is to create a technical committee that he can actually call on to make sure that he's engaging with people as he needs to and getting that kind of information. The request I had to the mayor was, our boards are typically, your boards are policy related. They're making policy recommendations up to you. And we just set the policy. We just set a very large policy. There may be a date and time where major changes are needed to that document, and we would want to reconvene somebody for you to be the advisory body to you of that kind of work. But I hadn't heard if there were actual policy things that would require us to create a board that reported to you. Does that make sense?
Well, and I guess just the discussions out of the CPAC process are like, a climate board, a equity board. We have lots of calls for things that people would like to see us do. And is there a way we can build provide some resources through, in the case of climate, through the staffer. In the case of equity, I don't know who that is, maybe through some kind of consultant, to where we build those check-ins into the work plans. We build that level of scrutiny into the work plans and the reports that we get.
New boards for a director to manage them takes up 10% of their time. I've also run into the problem where, in this case, the person who would be managing it is a union employee, which means that I am limited on their hours. Boards are typically meeting at night. I am paying overtime on them when I have a union employee going to those meetings and staffing them. It is hard for us to manage because the reason the union exists is to protect their time. I am planning to break their time from the moment I hire them, which is not great either. Kelly and I have talked about this probably weekly to try and figure out how we do that, which is why so many of our managers end up managing boards, is because I don't have to pay them overtime. And they have all the most up-to-date information typically. So I understand the benefits of boards, and I understand that they are important parts of our community for these tools. I am deeply concerned about adding more boards at this time when I don't have the staffing capacity. And even adding a new staff person who is a union employee does not get me that capacity because I then have the overtime piece. And just so everybody knows, like, I've had a number of employees who would like to be out of that requirement as the union. I am a union protector, though. I actually believe that we should protect the integrity of that structure, and I'm not moving people out of the union in order to let them work more hours.
But don't they get, can't you do comp time and stuff? What, is it necessarily overtime? Oh, really?
No. So somebody gets to choose how they want to be compensated. I have people who choose to do that with comp time, and I have people who choose to be paid. And I can't dictate which way they choose.
But couldn't somebody's schedule be such that on the fourth Thursday of every month they work from noon till 8 p.m. instead of
Kelly is ponying up for that answer.
8 to 5 or whatever?
No, there are, you can do standing schedule changes. You do need to work on that with the employee, and it gets somewhat on thin ice pretty quickly if you start sort of mandating a flex schedule when the position that they were, the position description for the job duties that they have were can be done during business hours. It's not entirely straightforward. You can do some, modified schedules. It's usually, when somebody wants to work 4/10s or, you could do, a 10 to 8 schedule, but you would actually need to be a collaborative discussion with the employee. It would be harder. I don't know. I'd have to talk.
Don't the police have fairly flexible schedules where sometimes they're working graveyard and sometimes they're working?
That is based on seniority, and it is based on a sign-up process that they choose, and it is a long-standing. It's also a different union with different standards for the union. And the key word of what Kelly just said is choice.
So they are choosing not to get comp time when they go to that flex schedule, and they are choosing not to get overtime when they go to that schedule. So a lot of people don't want to make that choice because they lose something that they could otherwise gain that they like. It's a nice perk.
So is the issue that we've already posted for this job? Is that
the sustainability job? We have posted for the job, but it's mainly that the duties that we assign to them, the achievement of all the things, happen during regular business hours. Okay. So those things set the time.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I would only say that the time issue and the budget issues are very real, and the management of that is very real. But I still have my overlapping. That bigger issue I started with about who's on first, the more balls you throw in my martini glass, sometimes that gets more and more confusing. So that's just something to consider as well. As you're thinking about creating new entities, how do you clarify the charge of that group or the jurisdiction of that group so that everybody plays well together?
And I think that actually goes to what Councilor Beatty is saying, which is we have a number of boards right now. We should be using them, and we should be figuring out how we function with those boards. And I would concur.
Well, I mean, and I think, we have climate plan that we need to make sure the relevant boards are taking actions that fit the climate goals. But I don't know that I see we need a new board for that. I mean, with the staff person who's hired can help, consult with you guys and figure out which boards he or she needs to.
For instance, one of the early gets is the SAFE project. So actually listed as one of the top goals of the next 2 years is achieving SAFE, because that is one of the #1 climate goals we have. Get sidewalks in, allow people to walk, get them on bikes, make it safe for them. That is a priority. So PSAC is going to be the primary on that forever. Trees. Another one of the requirements in there is making sure that we plant a lot of trees. Tree board is working diligently to try and figure out how they're going to plant a lot of trees. Some of them are internal services. How do these buildings become better? Got to figure that out, but I have the right staff, I think, to do that. They're pretty passionate. We're going to be negotiating with Northwest Natural and PGE. To be frank, I'm going to need probably the mayor to join us in those meetings, and it's probably going to be the mayor and the staff person going and actually trying to negotiate what it looks like for us to get a different portfolio for our community, and working with the PUC to actually structure something that allows us to negotiate. But those are closed-door negotiations. Those are typically things that you do with high-level PGE staff who are a little bit cautious about having things leak early. They want to make sure that the people who are in the room are dedicated to the outcome with them. We have a lot in the next 2 years. I'm actually not saying we shouldn't do a board at any point, but I do think that for the next couple of years, we do have a very strong policy direction from you that you approved at the last meeting that says you will do these things, accomplish them, and we are planning to accomplish them.
So I've been talking to you now for an hour and 16 minutes, and I don't know if all of you ate. So I just want to do a time check real quick. I also am supposed to run over to Art Mob here in a minute.
Yeah, and I mean, if we don't need to answer any other questions, I also have a little one in the other room. So,
so just a really quick recap. And obviously, you can talk to me anytime about any of this. But we got the thumbs up on the code of conduct. You, for now, would like us to keep doing the gentle pushes on the NDA in terms of the documentation, but do a pointed communication around kind of best practices for open meetings. We can do that in an NDA discussion. But there was, reminder as a part of the weekly updates or wherever we can do that to help make that happen. And then in terms of the boards and commissions, we're going to keep everyone moving ahead on the schedule they're on, except for Harbor and Tree Board. We're going to move them to the first of the year. We're going to convene a discussion after the first of the year with the leaders of all of our boards and commissions to just kind of talk this through, talk about, how do we assign primary, how do we cross communicate in a way that respects everybody's time and gets people the information they need. And so I think that would probably be a series of 2x2 conversations I might need to have to kind of develop materials for that, because that'll take some back and forth with all of you to make that a good meeting. But did I get the main gist? Okay.
And just so you know, Scott's offered to do a lot of that with you, so.
And Scott is wonderful, and Scott is more organized than me and better at preparing things, so it's going to be great.
Okay. Awesome.
Yep.
Okay.
When we do update the code one of these days on these boards and commissions, I know that the tree board was created as part of a package deal because we were Tree City USA and they have these mandates. Anyway, it's just odd to me that it's nowhere near the rest of them in the code, so I didn't even know where to find it.
Yeah.
Until you had the thing, and I was looking for it. And
it's the same as the library board.
Sure.
All right, well, thank you all. It's been helpful.
Thank you.
Yep.
Speaking of Harb.
Are we adjourned, Mr. Mayor?
Are we adjourned?
Sorry.
Well, I don't know. Are we do you need to have
I just wanted to question if we have a timeline on Wichita and
We do, November.
dedication.
They're not sure that they're going to actually do
Ribbon cutting?
a dedication. They wanted to make sure that people could actually use the space once they do it. So they may do an event in the spring. But the construction, at least when I talked to Catherine last week, was November.
Yeah, it's still supposed to be wrapping up this fall, but I think it just might be a mud pit, so I just don't know that they wanted to do an event.
They've started pouring the curbs and sidewalk stuff.
Yeah.
I was there the other
Are you wanting more detail on the construction timeline or the actual celebratory timeline?
Well, I was thinking, talking about tree board and the tree code made me think of Lynn Sharp and the dedication that they want to do for her, and I just wondered if there was any kind of date, because actually the Parks Foundation is raising money for that too. So
when is this is horrible, I should know. Arbor Day is which day?
It's actually not an official day.
Oh, we do it on Earth.
Each city can set its own Arbor Day. And so this is a discussion that we sort of had last week. We keep overlapping ours with Earth Day just to make it easier.
One big event.
One big event. But to a certain degree, if our intent on Arbor Day is to plant a bunch of trees, the spring is the wrong time to do it. We should move our Arbor Day to November. Or October, or late October, or somewhere in the good tree planting period of time.
I think part of the interest too is just that staff is doing so many events in this fall. So we've got the Carefree, we'll kick that off, and then you've got the Umbrella Parade, and then you've got Solstice, and you've got a lot of planning in there, is my guess. I haven't talked to Jason about it, but we can talk about that.
I mean, even if it was end of January or something where the tree gets some time with regular rain to root is the point.
Yeah, actually, NCPRD sent out their schedule today for their planting parties, and they're mostly January, February.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I'm also answering for the Lynn piece. We should figure that out, and we'll reach out to Catherine just to figure out when that's happening.
Okay.
Thanks.
Cool. Now we can be adjourned? Okay, we're adjourned.
Okay. Thanks.